Pittsburgh Steelers fans, what's going on? Day 2 of the 2019 NFL Draft is officially in the books for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That is barring they trade back into the third round because the third round is still going on. They're on pick number 92 of the third round. And so here we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. They did not trade into the second round. So if I would have bet my car, if you listened to the show yesterday, I would have lost my beloved Prius because they didn't trade some of their later round picks to move up to the second round as I predicted. They stayed put, no picks in the second round. And in the third round, they took 2 players. The first was wide receiver from Toledo, Diontae. What is his last name? Diontae. Dave, help me out here.
Johnson.
Johnson, that's right.
Johnson.
Yes. And then in the second pick, they took Justin Layne, cornerback, Michigan State. And I think the biggest thing was, and I kind of, you got to get a feel for the fan base. And I'm going to bring my co-host here in a second. The first pick of Diontae Johnson, people were like, what, who, what? They didn't know anything. He's from Toledo. It's a small MAC school. And so a lot of people were just kind of befuddled. I think that's a good word to describe the fan reaction. So with that said, I'm going to bring in Dave Schofield and get his take on the 2 picks, mainly the first one. Let's focus on the first pick first. Then we'll circle the wagons and talk about the second pick. So Dave, welcome to the show. And what are your thoughts?
My thoughts was, I would say befuddled was a good way to say it, because I didn't have the guy on my radar at that point. I thought when it came to wide receiver that if they didn't get Sills out of West Virginia in, say, the 4th round, that this guy might be their guy that they then try to pick up in the 4th or 5th, because they were connected to him some. I thought it was a reach at the time. And then I listened to Coach Daryl Drake's press conference afterwards, and the best part of that was the story where he did not call Bruce Arians by name, but he said the head coach of Tampa Bay cussed him out.
So, yeah, and the thing is, he used to work for Bruce Arians in Arizona, so they have a good working relationship. And Miles Boykin, wide receiver from Notre Dame, just goes to the Baltimore Ravens and pick number 93. There you go. It's on the board. So we're doing the show live. You're listening to us in replay. That's why we're calling out picks. We're not just randomly saying things on a podcast. Bryan Davis, welcome to the show. What are your thoughts on the pick? We'll talk first about the Toledo wide receiver.
Well, first of all, you're looking at it and you have all these big names you're looking at, and then you hear Diontae Johnson. It is a name that I've heard of, but most fans did not know his name going in. And so it's underwhelming. For me, it was a little bit underwhelming because I expected a bigger receiver. But, when you start looking at it, you hear, like Dave said, you hear what the coaches are saying about him. They obviously, if you're going to pick him with your second pick, but pick him in the 3rd round, you have a good grade on them. They know a whole lot more than we do. I'm going to just go back to 2 years ago when people bitched and moaned about picking Juju Smith-Schuster. I've seen it before. I've heard when Mike Wallace was picked, they're like, who's this guy? Nobody knew who he was. Unless you're looking at these guys every single day in the top 100, you don't know the names. I've got a buddy that when they noticed that there was to him there were no cornerbacks left on the board because Greedy Williams was gone and Byron Murphy was gone. So to him, all the corners were gone because he just doesn't know the names because he doesn't research them, and gets disappointed when he looks at the draft board because there's no one left. And right away I said to him, hey, there's a guy on the board from Michigan State. We'll talk about him later. But he called me up and said, oh yeah, you picked that right. So we get disappointed when we don't hear big names. We wanted Chase Winovich at number 2 because he was a big name. We want these guys that we've heard of. So, with that being said, Miles Boykin was a guy that people wanted. Hakeem Butler was a guy that I wanted. Obviously, they wanted this guy. They thought he fit in a whole lot better. So I'm fine with it.
Well, let's talk about, you brought up Boykin, okay? Because, you could say this with the Johnson pick. You look at the team that they have and you say, where are they going to fit? So when they drafted Johnson, my first thought, similar to what Bryan said, is that he's not the atypical tall burner on the outside. He's more of a shorter, shifty slot guy. A lot of people say he has a very similar skill set. I'm not saying the same as Antonio Brown. Good catcher of the football, good hands catcher, combat catches, good route runner, quick, not necessarily fast, but quick. I just said, where's he going to fit? And so then people were talking about, you know, I saw people on our previous last night's YouTube show and on our podcast to say that they wanted him to get Jermaine Pratt to trade up in the second round, and Pratt ended up going to the Bengals, by the way. But what would you do with him? Why would you make that pick? You just traded up to 10 to get Devin Bush. It doesn't make sense. And even Boykin, like, I don't think they're going to target another wide receiver, because what are you going to do with these guys? Who are you going to get rid of? I mean, think about it. Let's be honest. And on wide receivers, I feel like one of these guys, whether it's Eli Rogers or Ryan Switzer, is going to be gone. And it's just because they're not going to keep all these wide receivers. I highly doubt they're going to keep 3 slot receivers. Dave, you agree or disagree?
Yeah, it just kind of seems a little bit crowded there now. I was looking at the depth chart overall for the team before the draft started, and last year they did keep an extra wide receiver because of the special teams value of DHB. And I'm thinking, I don't know that they're going to keep 7 this year. That 6 might be where they are, but now, especially with guys with similar skill sets. I mean, I don't know. I think you're looking at the pick now, and Switzer and Eli Rogers, and there might be 2 spots there. But who knows? Maybe the Steelers had something else in mind for him.
Bryan, what do you think about that?
You know what? I mean, I'm not high on Eli Rogers. I haven't been, but this is a guy that is a big time punt returner and a not just a punt returner, he's a kick returner. So that might mean that they have somebody that value a little bit more than Ryan Switzer. They're letting it fight. They'll let them fight it out. But they're deep enough at wide receiver that they're okay. So I mean, that's why I don't have a problem with it. They're not going to keep all those guys. I think Rogers probably goes first.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to take another receiver. I'd be stunned if they do, unless you're talking an undrafted free agent. I think the next few picks are going to be positionally. Edge could be one, an outside pass rusher. I definitely think tight end. Definitely think running back. Dave, am I missing a position that you would add to that list of, hey, here's a position that they could actually add a piece to, and we're not talking about what we just did with the wide receivers?
No, I think you hit them pretty much there. Not that jumps off at the top of my head. I mean, I could see them double dipping at one of those positions. I mean, I don't know if it'd be running back, but possibly. I mean, they could really use some edge depth just because they didn't have much there last year, even if it's later rounds where they're looking at guys that could just be practice squad guys. Also, tight end depth could be one where if they don't draft more than one of each of those positions, that they're going to have at least one, if not 2 more undrafted free agents for those.
What about you, Bryan? Any other positions pop into your head that they could potentially draft that it's not going to be a log jam in training camp?
Safety.
Okay.
I really think that they're going to go ahead and look at a safety, and I have not seen it. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Is Chauncey Gardner Johnson still available? CBS had him listed at 40th. We saw some teams looking at him in the as a mock to the first round. I think that's a kid that Pittsburgh had been linked to, or maybe it was just fans hoped they looked at this guy. But I think he's a talent, and I've noticed that he's been dropping. If he's gone in the last couple of picks, but I haven't seen it. But their safety, they could definitely get help with safety. I like him on the edge. I like the kid from Old Dominion. I can't pronounce his name, so I definitely want him because I know Yinzers won't be able to pronounce Oshane Jimenez. I think it's Oshane Jimenez, but I'm not sure. But I want to see. I want to see Pittsburgh Steelers fans try to pronounce that. So and
he
he's
just
gone
went off the
by
board
way.
to the Giants.
He just went to the Giants. So,
Yes.
So I don't think Jimenez is a good fit for the Steelers in the 4th round, based on that.
Okay, so coming full circle here, and I do agree with your safety prediction there, Bryan, as a position that they could target. I said this in an article that I wrote briefly after the pick was made for Johnson in the 3rd round, the first pick, and that is that if there's a position Steeler fans should be comfortable with them taking, and maybe even using the dreaded R word, reaching, I think that wide receiver would be it. Bryan brought up what the fan reaction was when they picked Juju Smith-Schuster. If there's, you might not like it, but you got to trust the process on this position. Cornerback, defensive backs, and some other positions, outside linebacker, you have reasons to be skeptical. But ultimately, at wide receiver, you should be able to say, they have a plan for this kid. They definitely took him at that first pick because they didn't think he'd be there for their second, 3rd round pick. So trust the process. That's how I ended the article, and that's what I'll say here before we start talking about, okay, 2nd round, the 2nd pick of the 3rd round, and they went with Justin Layne, a cornerback from Michigan State. This is a guy who grew up in Cleveland. His family are huge Browns fans, and so now they have to cheer for the Steelers, which is hysterical. They came to a winning team, so that's fine. But ultimately, this is a player that several scouts websites had as a potential early 2nd, maybe even late 1st round player. Slides all the way towards the end of the 3rd round. Steelers get him. Talk about a value pick. And Dave, you were talking before we went on the air that this is a player that's not going to have to start right away, and that's a good thing. So tell us a little about what your thoughts are on Justin Layne coming to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Coach Austin that did the press conference after this pick, and that they were saying is that he is someone that will take a little bit to develop. But if you look at what the Steelers are looking at corner right now, then that's the good place to take someone like this. Would be this year, because Joe Hayden's only under contract for 1 more year. I'd like to see him get another year or 2 added onto that, but that's me personally. And Steven Nelson's come in. You've got to see how he's going to fit with the Steelers. So you've got people that are already entrenched. They're ready to go. That would automatically be higher on the depth chart, which means they'll have time, hopefully, to develop him. So I like to pick. I actually said that if you just switched these 2 picks, I might have been a little bit happier, but it really doesn't matter because it's the 2 players that they got. I felt that this pick at this point of the draft was a steal.
Yeah, I mean, they got the 2 guys. I mean, who cares if they picked them 1st or 2nd? I mean, other than even the slotting for the salary is going to be pretty much the same. It's not going to be too much difference there. Bryan, what were your thoughts when they got Layne in the 2nd pick of the 3rd round?
Well, I was elated, one, because I texted you before the pick, and in my knee-jerk reaction for the entire round, I had him listed as a guy that I wanted them to look at. He's 6'2". One site listed him as 6'3". CBS gave the grade an A. I know the coach said that it'll take some time to develop. That's fine, but he's not a project like Brian Allen was from a few years ago, a big guy that was a converted wide receiver, just like this is a converted wide receiver coming in being Justin Layne. I think it's just very interesting that he was mocked as high as 27 in a lot of places to the Oakland Raiders. I saw him in a lot of mocks very late in the draft. He's one guy that picked up a lot of steam, so I'm really liking this pick. Like Dave said, like you said, he doesn't need to start right away. You have Hayden, not just you have Hayden, you have Nelson. You also still have Cam Sutton to go ahead and compete for a job, and Artie Burns is competing for a job. So you throw this guy in there, and don't forget about the fact you have Mike Hilton as a slot corner. So now you've got more depth at that position than you've had in years. You've got more depth at inside linebacker than you've had in years. And now you've got more depth at wide receiver, not in years, but you've got more depth at wide receiver. So they definitely they definitely have an identity for this team that they want. So especially at wide receiver and corner, they know the guy they want. I like that they went bigger on corner, and I like the fact that this is a physical guy that could also play some man-to-man.
It's interesting that you look at their free agent acquisitions. What did they get? Inside linebacker, a hybrid guy, but inside linebacker, a cornerback, and a wide receiver. Their first 3 picks: inside linebacker, cornerback, and wide receiver. Not particularly in that order, obviously, but if you're wondering what their positions of need were, they'll tell you they went BPA and best player available, but at the same time, they're obviously our positions of need. Now, Bryan, I had tried to keep it in. I threw up in my mouth a little bit as I watched Josh Scobie go on stage and announce the Jacksonville Jaguars pick, and it brought back just some horrendous memories of the Josh Scobie experiment and those missed field goals against the Ravens that year. That was 2015 or 16.
It was 15.
That's what I thought.
No, 15.
It's the Josh
Yeah,
Scobie
and he's
debacle.
the debacle.
Yeah, I mean that was 4 games of just utter garbage, and especially against Baltimore, where Michael Vick was doing everything to help them win that game, and he was terrible that game too. But Scobie just blew 2 kicks, and really, I mean, they could have beaten on Thursday night, beaten Baltimore, and it was just really disgusting. The next week, they bring in Boswell. He goes crazy and does real well until he waited until 2018 to flame out.
But there was a kicker in between those two, was there not?
No, it was before that. It was Garrett Hartley.
Garrett Hartley. So he was before Scobie. I knew it was Hartley
from New Orleans.
Yes, he hurt his hamstring. He hurt his hamstring. Yeah. I remember him coming up lame on a kickoff.
Boswell was the 4th kicker, so it went Sweezum, Hartley, Scobie. Who I think I've hit more field goals at Heinz Field than him. I'm just from kicking at the fan blitz draft party, and then of course Boswell.
So okay, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent.
Well, you are the prototypical. Dave is the prototypical kicker. I mean, he's got kicker size.
Kicker, don't knock it.
All right, now Dave, you said you had a stat geek question for tonight.
Yeah, it's kind of leading into tomorrow. I just want everyone to understand the value of tomorrow. Still, that the Steelers have do they still have 6 picks tomorrow?
They have 1 in the 4th, 1 in the 5th,
3 in the
6th, and 1 in the 7th. So 6 total draft picks.
So they still have 6 total draft picks, and here's why. Obviously not counting 2019 because it just happened. The 3 previous drafts of the Steelers, they have drafted 22 total players. Of those 22 players, only 4 of them are not on the roster right now. Do you guys know what 4 they are together?
Okay.
How many drafts is that, Dave?
The last 3 years.
Okay, so Joshua Frazier's 1.
That's 1. That was last year's.
Yes, that was last year. And so you said there's 4 total?
Yes.
All right. Shoot. Trying to think. Bryan, you know any?
Well, yeah, Holba.
I was going to say, Jeff, how'd you not remember Holba?
I try to forget that guy.
Was it Colin Holba?
Colin Holba, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's 2.
Those were the 2 guys that never even made the practice squad. The other 2 guys that aren't with the team anymore were at least on the practice squad, and they were both from 3 years ago. So there you got 2018, 2017. So the other 2 were from 2016.
Keon Adams?
No, he's still on the team.
No, Keon Adams. He's still on the team.
He's still on the team. Here you go, Bryan. You ever watch the TV show Boy Meets World?
It's been
what was the name of their teacher?
Oh, Travis Feeney from Washington.
Yep,
Travis Feeney from Washington. That guy was.
I forgot.
He was the one he got poached off the practice squad by the Saints.
I forgot about him
at the end of the year, and then he ended up getting cut.
He looked sculpted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only other one actually played a few games for the Steelers, and then they tried to put him on the practice squad the next year, and he chose to go somewhere else.
wide receiver from Houston.
Yes.
That
He
was
went to New England.
Yep.
Ayers.
Yep.
Ah,
DeMarcus Ayers.
Marcus Ayers.
yeah, DeMarcus Ayers.
Those are the only 4 players in the last 3 drafts that are no longer with the Steelers. That just tells you that that you keep up with. Every pick is important because they might not last past the first 4 years, but those guys, when they're under their rookie deals to where they don't cost a lot, are going to be guys that are going to stick around at least on the practice squad.
Yeah, the Steelers do not like to part ways with draft picks. They really don't. They will. I was stunned that even a 7th-round pick in Joshua Frazier last year didn't make the team outright. So, Brian, what were you going to say? I know you were ready to say something.
I was just going to ask your opinion, both of your opinions, on how many draft picks over a 5-year period. Actually, just take one draft and what percentage of picks to hit in their career out of a draft. What are you looking at? 40% to be a successful draft? Because I have friends that I think they're misguided in the fact that they think Colbert can't draft for anything, and they think that the Pittsburgh drafts horribly because they're not hitting on every pick.
Well, what do you mean by hit?
And I just don't hit. I mean, they're just not getting guys to really shine and be starters. So, how many starters do you expect out of a draft?
Well, not every player
Ultimately.
not every player is drafted to be a starter. That's the one thing. I liked what Dave did when he did the article before the draft, and this is an article I asked him to do when it was to look at the day 3 picks. And how did you list those? Just to use make sure the verbiage was correct, Dave. You did you did high value, right? And then
high value, good value, and low value. I used high value because it was Martavis Bryant was the first one, so I thought that was appropriate.
Yeah.
And then I just went.
Oh, we lost him. Up. Is he back?
With special teams made the team, and it's kind of what you would hope to get out of that round. And then the low value was just a code word for bust.
Yeah. So, but to answer your question, Brian, if you have 10 total draft picks and you're taking all 10 players, I would say that if you have 50% of those players are contributors in some way or the other, I see that's a successful draft. Is that a notable draft? Is that a notable draft, like a draft that you're going to say, man, that draft was great? Like I think about you think that as you see things unfolding, you look at 2017. Let's talk about that draft. I mean, that's going to be one of those draft classes where you say that draft was really, really good when you talk about Watt, Smith-Schuster, James Conner. So I think it all depends. And we can't really evaluate these draft classes until later down the road. But Dave, if you had 10 draft picks and you take all 10 players, what's your percentage?
Well, it depends on if you're stacked early or late. Because I rather than look at the number of picks, I look at the round. I look at the first 3 rounds, you're going to be getting guys that are going to stick on the team. 4th round is you hope to. 5th round and on, there's not even a guarantee that those guys are going to make the roster. Those are guys that if they're good enough, they can make the roster. If not, you can at least hopefully get them on the practice squad. So that's why I look at it. So you're looking at basically almost just slightly over half your draft that will definitely make your team the beginning of September. So that's just the expectation.
Okay. Brian, do you agree or disagree with what we said in terms of answering your question?
No, I agree, and I was going to agree with you beforehand because I kind of thought what you said, but I wanted to bring that up as a lesson to people that are completely down on the front office, and especially the second round, the second pick in the 3rd round. Excuse me, the first pick in the 3rd round being Johnson. I mean, you said earlier, trust the process. Look, they know so much more than we do. They scout this every day for a year. They're looking at these guys. They know what fits their teams. I am sorry if I'm offending anybody, but we don't. We go to our jobs and we look on the internet and see what Mel Kiper Jr. says, and we see what Todd McShay says, and we read it, and it's gospel. And these guys, they don't know what's going on in the front offices as well. So whoever they draft, I'm pretty fine with. I figure they know more than I do.
Yeah, and everyone, I can't stand how everyone, always considers themselves to be smarter than the general manager. And I'm not one of those people. I openly admit that I don't follow college football that closely. It's just there's just too many teams, too many players. I feel like it's too watered down, and it's also too top heavy for me. But still, it's just a tough process. I mean, you have a scouting department that's scouring the country all throughout the college football season. They're going to pro days, they're going to all-star games, doing all this stuff to try and narrow down a pick that in analyzing players that you probably know are not going to be available to you. It's a tough process. And if you can get that 50%, I think that's your money in the bank. But let's go back and let's go over some grades, because I like to do this each day. Yesterday, we graded the trade up to get Devin Bush. Now we talk about how do you grade day 2? So we're not just looking individually. I want you to say, okay, if I'm grading the overall day, what grade do you give the Steelers? Bryan, we'll start with you.
I'm just going to give them a solid B.
Okay.
And that's really splitting the difference, because I had an A on Layne and I had a B minus. I had a B minus on Johnson. So right in the middle.
Okay, what about you, Dave? What grade do you give him? You were pretty upset when they picked Johnson. You were very, very upset.
No, I wasn't that
Yes,
upset.
he was. Bryan will admit it. You were upset. He was upset.
See,
wasn't he,
You
Bryan?
were, yeah, dude.
How do you measure tone in
you
a
were-
text message? Come on. Come on. No.
dude. I mean, I love you, Dave.
There
I
is
love
something.
you, but you were pouting.
Well, yeah, because there's something that I need to get over, and I've said it draft after draft, and I use Juju as the example, is that you sometimes it's so hard. Like Jeff is asking to grade right now on today. You have to look at everything, because I like that. I really like that wide receiver. I think he's going to be a great wide receiver. I'm so hung up on. I think they could have got him at a different pick and still had someone else there, but I don't need to be that hung up on it. I know a lot of Steeler fans wanted Winovich. I don't. I thought they might go Winovich, but I didn't know that the Steelers themselves really liked him. And he's 24. That's another thing. All the guys they've drafted so far, all underclassmen. They were all, represented at their pro days. And when I heard Coach Drake talk about, he's like, there was a lot of people at Johnson's pro day, and a lot of people were trying to be there under the radar. He was the sleeper pick for people. So I like him as a player. I wish they would have had more draft value at the time, but that's not really that big of a deal. I need to get over that. So once I get over that, I'm going B plus.
He's getting worked up right now. He's getting so fired up about this.
I know, because I don't want to be. I don't want to just be like the fans, because that's one thing that people are stuck on. And you guys are like, okay, I'm going to say it. Bryan told me that I've read too many comments on the message boards, but I'm the community manager. I have to read comments on the message board. I have to help moderate. So yeah, I know a lot of people were upset with that. But a lot of people in the live chat were really liking the wide receiver pick. They are. And maybe because people that didn't like it were mad and wouldn't watch. Who knows? So the more I think about it, and especially the more that I heard from the press conference, I went from, man, why'd they take him here, to like, okay, they knew what was going on in the background, and they knew where he could possibly go, and they made sure they got him first. But one other thing I want to say about the whole thing, Jeff, I'm very because I'm glad the Steelers didn't trade back up into the second, because I don't see anyone that went in the second round that I'm like, gee, if only they would have traded up and got them. I felt like they had a lot available to them in the third round where they picked.
I wouldn't be shocked if the Steelers put in a couple calls. And then when they started to see the chips falling, they said, we don't need to. We can just kind of stay where we are. And I think it worked out for him. I think that if you were to ask a a scout or even Kevin Colbert himself, he probably wouldn't have said that they would have changed much about the draft if they could. I think they really like this receiver. I didn't know a thing about him. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I watched any Toledo game film, because why in the world would I do that? But I trust people like, for instance, Bruce Gradkowski, who actually does the announcing for Toledo. He's an alum, and he loves this pick. He thinks this guy has a lot of Antonio Brown-like tendencies, and the way he runs his routes, his yards after the catch, his short area speed and quickness. I trust his opinion. So, I'm a fan. I'm going to read that. I'm going to take that for what it's worth. So there you go. But in terms of grades, I didn't give my grade. I'll give him a solid B, just a straight up B. I didn't. There wasn't anything that jumped off the page at me. I thought they were good value picks. Some people might call the first pick in the second round, Johnson, a reach. It's a wait and see pick, period, because I know nothing about him. It's a let's see what this kid can do. I trust the process with the wide receivers for sure. So, okay. Let's talk
Jeff,
about yes.
One quick question about that. The fact that it was a wide receiver that the Steelers that supposedly reached, does that make you feel better with it being the Steelers? I know with me, it sure does. I'm like, if you're going to, that's one position that I trusted more than anything. If you were to tell me they reached there on a defensive back, if they would have taken someone that was projected to be in the 6th round, in the 3rd round as a defensive back, it would be a lot harder to swallow.
Well, don't say that to Bryan, because he'll get all fired up, because they're great at drafting defensive backs according to him.
Okay, that's not what I'm saying. Okay, do you want me to get into the whole Senquez Golson thing? Because I can actually defend that pick.
Well, okay.
But here's my question to you, and this is a legitimate question. So Seattle trades up for the last pick of the 2nd round for DK Metcalf.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to wonder if Pittsburgh, if Metcalf was available to them, if they still go Johnson from Toledo over Metcalf.
I was going to ask the same question.
I think they do.
I think they do too.
If they were set, it seemed really set on that pick.
Metcalf, I
support it.
Metcalf, I did a scenario where the Steelers actually, he fell to them in the 1st round, because so many people had Metcalf as the first receiver off the board and stuff. And some people said, I saw some comments on BehindTheSteelCurtain.com where they said how he had such tight hips and that his 2-cone and 3-cone drills were just awful. Tom Brady's combine times in the 3-cone shuttle and the 3-cone drill and the shuttle were faster than DK Metcalf's. They showed that on ESPN. And so I'm sorry, but in terms of what the Steelers do offensively and how they move the ball and kind of matriculate it down the field at times, he doesn't fit their scheme. That's a guy that's not going to work in the Steelers system offensively. So he's a flashy guy. He can go down the field straight at a straight line speed, but in terms of those, it's good. Think back to, this is something Lance said last night. You got to replace those 15 touchdowns. Antonio Brown's touchdowns rarely were just a straight line go route. They were typically either yards after catch, post routes, working the sideline. Those are things that Metcalf does not do well. And throw in the fact that he's also injury prone, I personally don't think they would have taken Metcalf. Dave, what do you think?
I thought it at the time, but now that I see what I see with Johnson and what they thought of him, I don't think they will. Like I said, leading up to that pick, I thought, are they going to do this? Are they going to do this? And then he went, I'm like, oh, well, then I guess they'll go Winovich because that's what everyone thought. But no, like I said, that's not the team gave no indication of that. The more I hear about this and the more I compare this guy's skill set, the more I like him. I think I heard when they played Miami, so it was one of their better opponents that they played, and went against some really good defensive backs. 6 receptions, 100 and some yards. I'm thinking like 119. I don't know exactly, and 2 touchdowns. So against had a big game. That's what you want to see.
Yeah, and I think here's the problem: is that in the MAG you're not playing a lot of top competition. It's not like, Devin Bush played at Michigan, considered one of the best defenses in the nation. And he faced a lot of really good offenses in the Big Ten. Johnson doesn't have that on his resume. So, Bryan, I think you said you'd agree. You would not have taken Metcalf over Johnson.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, after the process, I mean, I would have probably been hoping for Metcalf because I didn't know much about this guy. So yeah, but in hindsight, being 2020, I get it now, especially the fact that this guy is a precise route runner. So that's exactly what Ben's looking for. Because what was the reason? What was one of the reasons that caused the Antonio Brown divorce? Because at points, AB was freelancing, and Ben mentioned something about a route that he ran a flat route, or that whole situation, and it caused a rift. This gives Ben a guy that's running precise routes, and he's going to try to prove himself. Now, is he an upgrade over Antonio Brown? Hell no, I'm not trying to say that. All I'm saying is you've got a perfect guy for their scheme, like you mentioned, Jeff. So, I mean, yeah, I think they did the right thing by picking him. And if Metcalf was on the board, they probably would have done the right thing. But in this whole draft process, with mock drafts, with everybody, like we mentioned before, we crave the sexy pick. We want what we see on TV. We want Oreos. Okay, we don't want Hydrox cookies. We don't want the generic Giant Eagle brand. We want the name brand. But when you look at it, you can go ahead and get the generic or off brand and do very well for what you're doing, and no one cares and knows the difference because the quality is just as good.
Yeah, so I think, so let's look at day 3 coming up tomorrow. Coverage starts at 12 o'clock. So day 3 typically is over around 4 or so, because the picks are flying off. You've even noticed on day 2 how much faster the picks were being submitted, and the round just went by quicker. So I think that what fans need to realize is, let's look at some, and Dave and Bryan, you guys are perfect examples. You can look for the Steelers to be targeting like a Jalen Samuels type. And don't be shocked. They have 3 6th-round draft picks. I don't think there's any chance. But then again, I said this last night. I put my Prius on the line. I'm not doing that again. I don't think there's any chance they actually take 3 players in the 6th round. I think that if there's a player that they like, let's say it's a running back, let's say it's a tight end, they might take one of those 6th-round picks, and they say, hey, we'll swap whatever round we're in, 4th round, 5th round. You can take our extra 6th. We want to move up. We want to take this player. I would expect the Steelers to make at least one more trade in this draft. But ultimately, I think that this team, you still can find impact players. Jalen Samuels, like I said, was a 4th-round pick. Try to think of some other recent 4th, 5th, 6th-round picks that have panned out, guys. Dave, Bryan, anyone?
Well, Jalen Samuels was a 5th-round pick.
5th round. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any day 3. Bryan. Any day 3 guys.
Martavis Bryant's a day 3 guy. He would have panned out more if he didn't have substance abuse problems. But I mean, he panned out for a little while. He was a good player, but he dropped because of his problems, and a lot of people knew that. But Vince Williams is a day 3 guy. He was a 6th-round pick. I'll give you a day 3 guy. Now, this is 15 years ago, but I'll give you a couple 7th rounders. One is Brett Kiesel.
Kiesel.
I think he was a 7B. I think he was the 2nd pick in the 7th round. We've got, and gosh, I'm forgetting his name. Calvin Beachum was a 7th round.
I was going to say, not only was Calvin Beachum a 7th-round pick, he was their 4th 7th-round pick. He's the lowest numbered pick. Him and Keon Adams were tied under Kevin Colbert, 248th.
Wow.
And of course, you've got Antonio Brown. That, I mean, somebody's going to mention that I didn't mention him, and we know that everybody knows he was a 6th-rounder. Excuse me, but yeah, the guys are out there. I mean, you could go ahead and develop the right guy. Colin Holba was really the best pick, and they let him slip through their fingers. But he was a 6th-round pick.
Jeff, that's Jeff's guy.
I'm sorry, what did he say?
He said they had Colin Holba, but they
Colin
let him slip
Holba.
right through his fingers.
Oh my gosh. I still remember typing that. I almost felt bad hitting the publish button on that article when they drafted a long snapper in the 6th round. 7th round, I get. You've gotten all the players you want. There's no one else really available. Hey, there's that long snapper from Louisville that we think could be the next Greg Warren, who could be our long snapper for 20 years. And then he doesn't even make the team. So,
Jesse James too. I think Jesse James
was a
served them very well.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and like I said, Dave did a whole article on those. So I'm just trying to say that there are players that are drafted on day 3. At so many times, fans will just tune out day 3. Rounds 4 through 7, they just brush them underneath the rug and say, well, these players don't really matter. There's still value in those rounds. You just have to be patient, see what the Steelers do, and really pay attention if they were to trade up and around for a specific player. If they trade up, the Steelers really want that player. And you could go back and even in Mason Rudolph, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent on him, but they traded with Seattle to move up to get him. And it's because they really coveted that specific player at that spot. So, guys, to end the show quickly, any parting words for our listeners? We'll start with Bryan. Bryan.
The faith.
There he is.
Keep the faith and understand, once again, that they know what they're doing, as even though we think they've lost touch with everything after all these years. I like this draft. I like the process, and just enjoy it and research some of these names. Just don't go off, just don't go crazy because you haven't heard of them, because there's a lot of guys that you've never heard of that you love. I guarantee you none of you knew who Hines Ward was. I guarantee you none of you knew who Juju. There's some of you that didn't know who Juju Smith-Schuster was. Nobody knew. I didn't even know who Antonio Brown was. So it's just trust the process, and this is their job. And the pride that you put in your job, they're putting pride in their job. Their job is just in the spotlight. So just have fun with it.
Yeah, very good. Dave, any parting words?
Yeah. Someone I'd like to see him draft tomorrow, even if they have to trade up to get him. And that is, if I can get the name right, Bryan might have to tell me. It's Foster Moreau, tight end out of LSU. He's still on the board.
Yeah.
That is a position of need. That is someone I would like to see them go get. But I'm also going to trust that if they don't, it's because there's someone else that they like. That's also, I think, what happened with Johnson is, why take a different wide receiver there when you knew you wanted him, and you don't need to draft more than one. So, especially high. So, yeah. So I trust the process. Bryan is right. Trust that the Steelers know what's going on. This is the hardest of these 3 days to talk about, because the first day you're talking about the glory of the first round and the excitement of it. Today, you're going to, and everyone knows the first round names if you've spent any time with everything. But then you're getting into names on day 2 that you don't know. Then tomorrow is going to be much better, because when it's all said and done, you can look at the draft as a whole. And it's so much easier to look at the draft as a whole to see what the Steelers got. And they're like, oh, well, why didn't they take an edge rusher with their second pick? Well, that's because they had an edge rusher that they liked better that they're going to get in the 6th round. So things like that are what's going to shape up. So tomorrow, still lots of value, and it's really going to put everything into perspective.
Yeah, and I'll finish it up with kind of piggybacking off what you guys said. When you're watching film and doing research on these college guys, keep the film, take it in with a grain of salt. Because I'll give you an example. If you're watching a Mac film, I mean, I'll never forget watching Dree Archer highlights and saying, holy cow, I can't wait to see this guy just run wild on the National Football League. And what happened? He did not run wild on anyone. He ran himself right out of the league, essentially, and he just never was able to duplicate that success because it's a completely different game. So when you're talking about, okay, oh yeah, I was watching film on Johnson from Toledo, he's going up against MAC competition. Now that Miami game, that might be a little bit better gauge, but it's all these players are going to be waiting to see. Sure, Devin Bush's film from a Big Ten school like Michigan, where they have such a difficult schedule, is going to be more impressive than, say, Johnson's from Toledo. But at the same time, you have to keep everything in perspective. So that's important too. So with that said, just remember that if you're just now following the show, like let's say you just popped onto YouTube, I'm looking at our live chat right now. We have over 200 people again for the second straight night. That's awesome. We appreciate it. If you have not subscribed to the show, subscribe. We do weekly podcasts on this channel. You can go back and check them out. We do The Standard is a Standard, myself and Lance Williams. We have my show, The Burning Question, and then the trio that you see right now, the Steelers preview guys. But also follow us on our podcast platform. We do 5 shows a week. It's anywhere where you search for podcasts. That's Google Play, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere. Just search Steelers Behind the Steel Curtain. You'll find our podcast. Subscribe, and make sure you check those out. And as always, BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. We had, I don't know how many articles we had up today, a ton of articles before the second round of the draft. If you're a Steelers fanatic, and I say that intentionally, if everything you love about the Steelers is, man, I just love the black and gold, there's no better place for you to be than BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. So with that said, guys, thank you for your time. We will be back tomorrow after day 3. We'll be a lot earlier in the day, but when the picks finish and we're all wrapped up, we will be back to talk about the day 3 draft picks, who they got. Maybe they traded up. Should you be excited? Should you be disappointed? We'll talk about all that tomorrow. We'll see you on another episode.